The man standing at the far end of the expo hall didn't look like someone who belonged there. His shirt was worn at the collar, his table was made of plywood propped on folding legs, and what sat on top of it looked like something pulled straight from a dumpster. People laughed. They pulled out their phones to record him. A security guard had already walked over twice, but 30 minutes later, a black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman in a tailored suit stepped out, walked past every polished booth and glowing display, and stopped right in front of him. Nobody laughed after that. And what they didn't know, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that the man standing behind that table had been moving toward this moment for 10 years. Caleb Matthews was 27 years old, and he had learned early that the world does not wait for a man to catch his breath. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, a place that was technically 2 rooms if you counted the narrow kitchen nook, where a mini fridge hummed so loud at night it sometimes woke his daughter. The apartment smelled of solder and machine oil, a scent that had settled so deeply into the walls and carpet that no amount of cleaning could fully remove it. To Caleb, it wasn't an unpleasant smell. It was the smell of work. His daughter's name was Lily. She was 6 years old, small for her age, with wide brown eyes and a habit of collecting broken things, cracked toy cars, busted calculators, old remote controls, and lining them up on the windowsill as if they were precious. She had been sick off and on since she was 3. Nothing catastrophic, the doctors said, but nothing simple either. A recurring lung condition that required regular medication, 2 specialist visits a year, and on bad months, a short hospital stay. Caleb had long since memorized the name of every drug on her prescription list, every dosage, every potential side effect. He kept the paperwork in a manila folder on top of the fridge, clipped together with a binder clip, reviewed every time a new bill arrived. He had once held a job with a small electronics manufacturer on the outskirts of town. Quality control, circuit testing, systems troubleshooting. Not glamorous work, but steady. He had been good at it, patient enough to catch what faster technicians missed, precise enough to trace a fault across 12 layers of board without losing the thread. Then the company was acquired. The new management restructured. Caleb's entire department was let go in the same week, along with 42 other people. He received a severance check that covered 6 weeks of rent and not much else. That had been 2 years ago. Since then, he had been doing what he could. Small repair jobs picked up through word of mouth, a neighbor's busted laptop, a bar owner's broken sound system, a dentist office's obsolete intercom that no one else would touch. He charged fairly, finished fast, and never promised what he couldn't deliver. But the work was inconsistent. Some months he made enough, others he did not. What kept him steady wasn't money. It was Lily. Every morning before school, she would climb onto the stool beside his workbench and watch him work. She asked questions he never dismissed. What does that piece do? Why does the light blink? Why do you always smell the board before you test it? He answered every one. He told her that a circuit is like a conversation, that electricity moves the same way logic does, that a broken thing isn't useless, it's just misunderstood. She absorbed all of it. People who passed Caleb on the street, who saw him hauling a duffel bag of tools or stopping to pick through the electronics recycling bin outside the library, generally made certain assumptions, that he was struggling, that he had made poor choices, that the slight slump in his shoulders was the posture of a man who had given up. They were right about one thing. He was struggling. Everything else, they had completely wrong. It had started with a fan, not the decorative kind, an industrial cooling fan, salvaged from a discarded server tower that someone had left beside a dumpster behind a data center on the edge of town. Caleb had seen it during a repair job nearby and taken it home in the back of his car without fully knowing why. The fan was still functional. That was the thing about hardware that people threw away. Most of it wasn't broken. It was just no longer convenient. Over the following months, he started collecting more deliberately. He made a circuit of the industrial recycling drop-offs, the electronics bins at the public library, the surplus pile behind a small IT firm that cleared its inventory twice a year. He wasn't hoarding. He was sourcing. Every component he kept had passed a test. If it didn't function, he didn't take it. If it functioned but had no clear application, he cataloged it and waited until he understood why it might matter. He kept everything in labeled bins stacked along the wall of his apartment: capacitors, voltage regulators, heat sinks, microcontrollers, signal amplifiers, lengths of copper wire. He had stripped and sorted by gauge. Lily called it Daddy's wall of pieces. She was not wrong. The idea had come to him during one of Lily's hospital stays, the kind of restless, half-awake thinking that happens in waiting rooms at 2 in the morning. He had been going over a problem he'd first noticed in his repair work. Small commercial clients, restaurants and clinics and small offices were consistently overpaying for energy because the systems managing their power, the controllers that balanced load between different devices, were either outdated, overbuilt, or poorly calibrated for their actual usage patterns. The hardware that could solve the problem existed. The software logic was not complicated. What was missing was a cheap, modular way to put it together. He started building when he got home. It took 14 months. The device he eventually produced looked, to any untrained eye, like a disaster. It was roughly the size of a lunchbox, assembled from components that had clearly never been designed to exist together. Strips of recycled circuit board were layered and soldered at angles. A repurposed microcontroller, originally from a car's dashboard system, served as the brain. 2 salvaged capacitors, mismatched in color and size, served as the energy buffer. The casing was a cut-down server panel, bent and re-drilled by hand. It was, without question, one of the ugliest objects Caleb had ever made. It was also the most sophisticated. What the device did, in plain terms, was this. It monitored real-time electrical load across multiple inputs, identified waste patterns in milliseconds, and redistributed power dynamically to prevent the kind of inefficiency that silently inflated every commercial energy bill. In testing, which Caleb had done patiently across 6 different setups, including his own apartment, a neighbor's small office, and the back room of a barber shop, whose owner owed him a favor, it had consistently reduced energy consumption by between 37 and 43%. He had done the math. For a single mid-size commercial property, that translated to somewhere between $8,000 and $14,000 in annual savings. For a portfolio of properties, a hotel chain, a hospital network, a retail franchise, the number multiplied into something almost difficult to say out loud. The device had no brand. It had no patent, not yet, though he had printed the application form and read it 11 times. It had no name except the one Lily had given it when she first saw it sitting on his workbench. She had pressed her chin on the edge of the table, studied it for a long moment, and said, "It looks like a puzzle box." Caleb had not corrected her. The Columbus Emerging Tech Expo was held on the 2nd Saturday of November, in a converted warehouse space near the Scioto River that the organizers had dressed up with track lighting, vinyl banners, and a rented espresso machine near the entrance that no one seemed to use. It was the kind of event that wanted badly to be something larger than it was: local startups, a few regional investors, a modest press list, and a handful of academics who attended every year out of habit. Caleb had paid the $75 table fee 6 weeks in advance, setting aside the money from 3 repair jobs. He had received a confirmation email with a floor number and a table assignment near the back of the hall. He had not been given a category, a description slot, or a place in the program. He was listed simply as independent exhibitor. He arrived early, before the doors opened, carrying the device in a padded plastic bin he had lined with foam cut from an old mattress topper. He also brought a folding table, a power strip, 2 printed data sheets he had made at a copy center for $11, and a handwritten sign that read, in large, clean letters, "Adaptive Power Optimization System, Live Demo Available." He set up in 20 minutes, arranged the data sheets in a neat stack, plugged the device into a test outlet, and waited. The hall filled steadily. Most of what surrounded him was, by any measure, impressive. The startup 2 tables over was presenting a machine learning platform with a 42-inch monitor and a backlit logo panel. The booth across from him had a team of 4, all wearing identical navy blazers, demonstrating a drone delivery prototype with a looping video reel. Near the entrance, a company offering an artificial intelligence scheduling app had installed a miniature stage where a presenter gave a polished 5-minute pitch on the hour, every hour. Caleb's table, by comparison, Looked like someone had set up a garage sale inside a museum. He knew that. He wasn't embarrassed by it. He had understood, before he came, that the optics were not in his favor. He wasn't selling the optics. He was selling what the device could do. Those were two entirely different things, and he had long since stopped confusing them. But the gap between those two things was exactly what the room saw. Attendees moved through the space with the particular efficiency of people who had allocated a fixed amount of time to being impressed. They paused at the booths with the largest screens, the most people, the most noise. They slowed down for anything with a rotating display or a free branded item. They glanced at Caleb's table, registered what they saw: a young man in a worn shirt, a salvaged device, a handwritten sign, and kept moving. One woman in a lanyard stopped and picked up one of his printed sheets. She read the first line, set it back down, and walked away without saying anything. A man in a checkered sport coat paused to look at the device, picked it up briefly, turned it over, set it down. "What does it do?" he asked. Caleb answered clearly and concisely. The man nodded slowly, in a way that meant he had not understood a single word, then said, "Cool, cool," and moved on. By 10 o'clock, Caleb had spoken to 7 people. 2 had been genuinely curious but admitted the technology was outside their area. 3 had given him the polite version of dismissal. 1 had asked if it was art. 1 had not spoken at all, only stared at the device with visible confusion before quietly backing away. Caleb poured coffee from a thermos he had brought from home, checked the demo unit's power readout, and straightened the data sheets for the 4th time. He had told Lily, that morning before dropping her at his neighbor's apartment, that he would be back by evening. She had handed him a folded piece of paper, a drawing she had made of his device, labeled in her handwriting, "Daddy's Puzzle Box." He had put it in his jacket pocket. He could feel it there now. They arrived sometime around 11:30, a group of 5, mid-20s to early 30s, the kind of young professionals who had the expensive sneakers and the casual confidence of people who had recently raised a funding round or were very close to believing they had. They moved through the hall in a loose cluster, laughing at something among themselves, pausing occasionally at booths with the practiced eye of people who spent weekends at events like this. They stopped at the drone company. They watched the machine learning demo. They collected 2 branded stress balls and a pen from the scheduling app booth. And then they reached Caleb. The first one to notice was a man in a slim-cut gray jacket, tall, with the easy posture of someone accustomed to being looked at. He slowed, looked at the table, looked at Caleb, and then looked back at the table again. A slow smile spread across his face. "What's this?" he said, not entirely to Caleb. One of the others stepped closer. Is that soldered together by hand?" She was already pulling out her phone. "It's an energy optimization system," Caleb said. His voice was even. "Adaptive load management. It redistributes electrical consumption in real time to eliminate waste." The man in the gray jacket picked up one of the data sheets, scanned it for 4 seconds, and set it back down. "Bro," he said to the group, with a laugh that invited them all to join, "someone brought actual junk to the expo." They laughed. Not cruelly. Exactly the way people laugh when they feel safe, when the target isn't the kind of person who could respond in any way that would cost them anything. The woman with the phone was filming now, angling her camera across the table at the device. "This is incredible," she murmured, in the tone someone uses when they mean the opposite. "$1 million tech right here, guys." A few passers-by slowed to see what the laughter was about. Some of them smiled without knowing exactly why, catching the energy of the room. One older man shook his head slowly and kept walking. A teenager stopped, looked at the device, looked at the group laughing, and laughed too reflexively, the way people do when they don't want to seem like they're missing the joke. Caleb said nothing. He straightened one of the data sheets that had shifted slightly on the table. He checked the demo unit's display. He poured the last of the coffee from his thermos and held the cup with both hands. He had expected this. Not this exact group, not this exact moment, but something like it. He had known, from the moment he loaded his car that morning, that the most likely outcome of the day was not a deal or a handshake or even a serious conversation. It was this. The look that people give to things they don't understand, dressed up as mockery, because mockery feels less threatening than the possibility that you've missed something. He had felt that look before. He had watched it erase people, watched men twice his age shrink under it, pack up their tables, change their minds about themselves. He had made a decision, some time ago, that the look would not work on him. The man in the gray jacket was still talking, narrating the device to his group as if giving a comedic tour. "And this part," he said, pointing to one of the salvaged capacitors, "is definitely a piece from a 1990s television set." One of them said, "Someone call security." They laughed again. Caleb looked at the man directly for the first time. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He held eye contact for exactly long enough to establish that he had heard everything, understood everything, and had chosen silence as a complete and considered response. Then he looked back at his device. The man in the gray jacket seemed, for just a moment, slightly less comfortable than he had been. He said something else, quieter, and the group moved on. Caleb waited. The man who approached at 12:45 had a staff lanyard, a clipboard, and the uncomfortable expression of someone delivering a message he had been asked to deliver but did not fully believe in. His name was Derek, according to the badge. He was around 30, with a cautious energy about him, the kind of person who chose his words carefully, not because he was thoughtful, but because he was afraid of saying the wrong one. "Hey," Derek said. He stopped at the edge of Caleb's table. "So, I've been asked to come over here by the floor coordinator." Caleb looked up. "Okay, there have been some comments from other exhibitors and a few attendees." Derek glanced down at his clipboard, then back up. "The concern is that the appearance of your display is a bit inconsistent with the overall presentation standard of the event." Caleb let the sentence sit for a moment. "You're asking me to leave." Derek shifted his weight. "Not immediately. But yeah, we'd appreciate it if you could start packing up in the next 30 minutes or so." The space behind Caleb's table had, by now, acquired a small orbit of ambient spectators, people close enough to hear, positioned with the studied casualness of those pretending not to listen. A few of the nearby exhibitors had paused their conversations. The man from the machine learning booth was looking over. Caleb stood up straight. He was not a tall man, but when he stood still with his full attention directed at something, there was a quality to his stillness that was hard to read around. "How much time do I have left?" he asked. "We'd like you to start now, honestly." "I paid the table fee," Caleb said. "Not as an argument, as a fact." Derek nodded. "I know. And that's not, the refund process. I can look into that for you. I don't want a refund." Caleb picked up one of his data sheets, looked at it briefly, set it down again. "I'd like 1 more hour. That's all." Derek looked uncomfortable. "I don't know if that's 1 hour, Caleb said. His tone hadn't changed. It was patient, direct, and entirely without pleading. "After that, if no one has engaged seriously with this product, I'll pack up without any issue. I won't cause a scene. I won't make this difficult. I just need 1 more hour." There was a pause that lasted long enough to be noticed by everyone nearby. "The thing is," Caleb added, quietly enough that only Derek could hear him, "I didn't come here to impress anyone. I came because somewhere in this building, there might be exactly one person who understands what this does. That's all I need." "One person." Derek looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at the device on the table, really looked at it, perhaps for the first time, past the appearance of it. He clicked his pen. "I'll give you to 1:30, he said. "But if the floor coordinator asks, I'll take responsibility for it," Caleb said. "Thank you." Derek walked away. The ambient spectators peeled off. The machine learning guy went back to his demo. Caleb sat back down. He repositioned the device slightly on the table so the main display panel faced forward at a cleaner angle. He checked his watch. 47 minutes. He thought about Lily, who was at this moment probably sitting on his neighbor's couch watching cartoons and asking questions about how the television worked. He thought about the manila folder on the refrigerator. He thought about the cost of next month's medication, which he had not yet fully covered. He straightened his sign, folded his hands, and waited. Evelyn Cross arrived at the Columbus Emerging Tech Expo at 12:53 in the afternoon, which was, technically speaking, too late to matter. The event was winding down. The espresso machine near the entrance had been unplugged. Several exhibitors were already consolidating their materials, rolling up display panels, disconnecting cables, The energy of the morning, that particular blend of ambition and performance that fills rooms like this, before the disappointment of reality sets in, had largely dissipated. Evelyn had not intended to attend at all. She was 34 years old, the founder and chief executive of Green Cycle Systems, a company she had built from a two-person consulting firm into a mid-size operation with 63 employees and an annual contract portfolio that had cleared $18 million in the previous fiscal year. The company's core business was energy efficiency consulting for commercial real estate, helping property managers, hotel chains, and healthcare networks understand where they were wasting money and what it would cost to stop. It was not a glamorous business, but it was a precise one, and Evelyn ran it with the methodical focus of someone who had never once confused movement with progress. She had planned to spend this Saturday at her office reviewing quarterly projections. Her assistant, Marcus, had flagged the expo 2 weeks earlier as a potential networking opportunity. Evelyn had dismissed it. Then, that morning, a scheduled call with a key client had fallen through, and Marcus, sensing an opening, had sent her the address with the note, "Go. 2 hours. It probably won't hurt." She went. She wore a charcoal suit with a white shirt, no lanyard, no badge. She had not registered. At the entrance, she gave her name to a volunteer who looked her up, found no record, and then looked up again at the suit and quietly waved her through. Evelyn moved through the hall the way she moved through most environments, efficiently, without lingering, filtering what she saw against a set of internal criteria that had been refined over 11 years in the industry. She noticed the drone company and identified within 40 seconds that their logistics model would fail at scale. She stopped at the machine learning booth, asked one precise question about training data methodology, received an answer that told her everything she needed to know, and moved on. She was nearly at the end of the hall when she stopped. Later, when someone asked her what had made her pause, she would say it was the handwritten sign. Not the slickness of it, obviously. There was none. It was the precision of the letters. The sign did not say something vague or aspirational. It said exactly what the thing was. Adaptive Power Optimization System Live Demo Available. 6 words and a technical category. No tagline, no hyperbole, no appeal to disruption or the future. That kind of brevity, in her experience, came from 2 places: people who had no idea what they were selling, and people who knew precisely what they were selling and had no patience for anything else. She looked at the device. It was, objectively, a mess. Visually, it had no business existing in any professional context. The soldering was dense and asymmetrical. The casing was clearly salvaged. One of the indicator lights appeared to be from a completely different era of electronics manufacturing, blinking with the slow, steady pulse of a wristwatch rather than anything digital. She looked at the man behind the table. He was not what she expected. He was young, younger than she had anticipated from the sign. His shirt was clean but well worn. He was sitting with both hands folded on the table, not pitching to anyone, not distributing materials, not trying to stop people walking by. He was simply present, in the way that very few people at events like this manage to be present, as if he had nowhere else to be and no interest in being seen. He looked back at her. "Can I show you what it does?" he said. It was not the question she usually heard. Usually people told her what things did, often before she'd asked. The question was quieter than that. It was an offer, not a performance. Evelyn stepped forward, put her hands in her jacket pockets, and said, "Please." What followed was, by every outward appearance, an ordinary conversation. Evelyn stood on the opposite side of the table. Caleb connected the demo unit to the power strip and brought the display panel to life, a modest LCD screen showing 3 columns of real-time data: input load, distribution output, and waste percentage. The numbers shifted in small increments, the way live data does when it is not staged. "Start from the problem," Evelyn said. "Not a request, an instruction." "Most commercial properties run on static load distribution," Caleb said. "The system draws what it expects to draw based on a fixed schedule peak, off-peak, baseline. But actual usage patterns don't follow that schedule. They're irregular, reactive. A restaurant has different consumption at 11 in the morning versus 1 in the afternoon versus 9 at night. A medical office complex uses different load profiles on a Monday versus a Thursday. Static distribution treats all of that the same way, which means you're either overpowering circuits that don't need it or creating microsurges in ones that do. Standard inverter technology addresses some of that, Evelyn said. For single-source systems, yes. This handles multi-input environments, buildings with mixed legacy and modern infrastructure, older wiring configurations, the kind of places where a standard inverter install doesn't pencil out because the baseline infrastructure can't support it without a full retrofit. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. What's the integration architecture? Caleb reached under the table and produced a single folded sheet of paper, not a brochure, but a hand-drawn schematic with annotations in fine print. He unfolded it and laid it flat on the table. The control layer is modular, he said, pointing to a section of the schematic without touching the page. I used a repurposed automotive microcontroller here because it handles variable state processing better than most purpose-built chips at this price point. The buffering system here manages the load transition. The response latency is under 4 milliseconds. Evelyn leaned forward. Under 4. Consistently. I've run it across 6 different real-world configurations. The worst result was 3.8. There was a pause. Around them, the hall continued its low-grade activity, the sound of tables being broken down, conversations ending, bags being zipped. No one nearby had any particular awareness that the conversation happening at the far table had shifted in nature from everything else in the room. A man passing by glanced at Evelyn and Caleb, registered what appeared to be a well-dressed woman talking to the guy with the junk display, and kept walking with the mild curiosity of someone who has briefly wondered about something and immediately moved on. What's your failure rate? Evelyn asked. In my testing configurations, 0. In the real-world installs, 1 partial fault in 6 months. A capacitor I sourced from a bad batch. I replaced it and identified the sourcing issue. With commercial-grade components throughout, I'd expect a failure rate below 0.3% annually. You don't have commercial-grade components throughout. No, Caleb said, because I built this for under $200. A commercial production version, with proper sourcing, proper casing, proper certification testing, I've priced it at roughly $800 per unit at volume. The annual energy savings for a single mid-size commercial property average around $11,000. Evelyn straightened. She did the arithmetic in the way she always did it. Not visibly, not with a pause, but in the background of everything else. The way people who work with numbers for long enough learn to do without thinking. 800 in, 11,000 saved in year 1. Payback period under 30 days. Who else have you shown this to? She asked. People at this event. Before this event. No one with authority to act on it, Caleb said. I filed a provisional patent 3 weeks ago. I don't have a lawyer yet. I don't have funding. I have the device, the testing data, and the schematic. Evelyn looked at the schematic again. She looked at the LCD display, where the waste percentage column was currently reading 2.1%, which meant that the device, connected to nothing more than a power strip and a light fixture in a converted warehouse, was already doing something. You built this alone? She said. Yes. While working? Yes. How long? 14 months of active build. About 3 years of thinking before that. Evelyn looked at him for a moment, with an expression that was not quite readable. It was the expression she made when she encountered something that forced a recalibration, not surprise, exactly, but the quiet recognition that her model of a situation needed updating. I need to make a call, she said. Don't go anywhere. She stepped away from the table, put her phone to her ear, and walked to a quieter section of the hall near an emergency exit that had been propped open to allow the breeze in. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Caleb sat at his table and did not watch her. He refilled the empty thermos cap with the last half-inch of cold coffee that had pooled at the bottom, thought about whether he should eat the granola bar in his bag, and decided to wait. He had learned patience the slow way, not as a discipline, but as a consequence. When Lily was in the hospital at 3 years old, the first long stay, he had spent 4 consecutive days in a plastic chair with a view of a parking garage, learning how to exist without information. The doctors came when they came. The results arrived when they arrived. There was nothing to accelerate, no action to take, no behavior that would speed the clock. He had sat there and breathed and waited and come to understand, in the deep structural way that only difficult experience can teach, that patience is not passivity. It is the decision to stay present when staying is the hardest option. He had applied that understanding to the device, to the 14 months, to the mornings spent soldering while Lily slept, to the evenings spent reading technical journals at the kitchen table while the refrigerator hummed, to this morning, when he had loaded his car in the dark and driven to a convention center knowing that most of what awaited him was dismissal. What he had built was real. He had never needed anyone else to confirm that, but he had always understood that reality and recognition are not the same thing, and that without recognition, without the particular moment when the right person looks at the right thing and understands what they are seeing, reality, on its own, doesn't pay for medication. The device's test numbers were not estimates. They were documented. He had kept a written log for every configuration date, location, baseline measurement, post-install measurement, duration, notes on anomalies. 46 pages, handwritten in a composition notebook that he kept in the padded bin beside the device. He had not brought the notebook to the table because it would have looked like too much. But it existed, and every number in it was real. The reduction in energy waste averaging 40% across 6 diverse installations addressed a problem that was, in industry terms, enormous. The commercial real estate sector in the United States alone burned through an estimated $150 billion in avoidable energy costs annually. Most of the existing solutions on the market required either a full infrastructure retrofit, a proprietary software platform with significant ongoing licensing fees, or an installation process so complex that smaller property managers couldn't justify the cost. Caleb's device required none of that. It was modular, standalone, and infrastructure agnostic. It could be installed by any competent electrician in under 3 hours. It required no software license. It worked on legacy systems. It worked on modern systems. It worked essentially on anything that used electricity at commercial scale. He had known this for over a year. He had sat on it, not out of complacency, but because getting from a working prototype to a commercial product requires things he did not have: capital, manufacturing connections, legal support, distribution. He had been working toward those things incrementally, the only way available to him. He had made the provisional patent filing himself, using a do-it-yourself legal platform at 1 a.m. after Lily had fallen asleep, cross-referencing 3 different patent guides he had borrowed from the library. It had cost $90. He had triple-checked every section. The device sat on the table in front of him, blinking steadily. The display read the same numbers it had been reading for the past 3 hours. Stable, functional, real. Evelyn came back around the corner of the emergency exit and walked directly toward him. Her expression had not changed exactly, but there was something decided about it now, the way a face looks when the internal conversation has concluded. She pulled the chair that Derek had left beside the table and sat down across from Caleb. She placed her phone face down on the table. She folded her hands. "I want to tell you what I know," she said. "And then I want to hear what you need." Caleb said, "Okay." Green Cycle consults on energy reduction for commercial properties. We've been looking for a hardware solution that bridges legacy infrastructure and modern load management for 2 years. We've evaluated 6 products. None of them work at the price point required for smaller properties to justify adoption. She paused. "Yours does." "Yes," Caleb said. "You have a provisional patent, filed 3 weeks ago. You have testing documentation, 46 pages. I'll need to have our technical team review the documentation and verify the testing methodology. That would happen this week. If it holds, and based on what you've shown me, I have no reason to believe it. Won't I want to move to a formal agreement?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "What kind of agreement?" "A development and licensing partnership. Green Cycle funds the path to commercial production engineering review, component standardization, certification testing, manufacturing onboarding. In exchange, we receive exclusive licensing rights for commercial real estate applications for an initial period of 5 years, with renewal options." She looked at him directly. The initial payment for licensing rights would be $1 million, payable on execution of the formal agreement, contingent on technical verification. The number landed in the space between them without fanfare. Evelyn said it the way she said all numbers, as information, not theater. Caleb did not move. He had spent enough time imagining various versions of this conversation that he had prepared for both the possibility of it happening and the possibility of it not happening in roughly equal measure. What he had not fully prepared for was how quiet the moment would feel. "That's fair," he said. Evelyn allowed herself something very close to a smile. She reached into her jacket and produced a single sheet of paper, a term sheet, already printed, that she had generated during her 11-minute phone call. "This isn't the formal agreement," she said. "This is an intent to negotiate, binding on both parties to engage in good faith. It includes a 48-hour exclusivity window. If you want time to consult with a lawyer before signing, I'd like to read it now," Caleb said. She placed it on the table. He read it. He read it again. He asked 2 questions, one about the scope of the exclusivity clause as applied to residential applications, which she answered clearly, and one about the timeline for technical verification, which she confirmed at 72 hours. Then he picked up the pen she placed beside the sheet and signed it. She signed below him. The people nearby, the exhibitors who had not yet fully packed up, the staff moving through the hall, the few remaining attendees drifting toward the exit, registered, in pieces, that something had changed at the table at the far end of the hall. They weren't sure what, exactly. There was no announcement, no visible celebration. A woman in a suit and a man in a worn shirt had been talking for a while, and now they had both signed a piece of paper, and they were both sitting quietly, and the man was looking at the piece of paper in the way someone looks at a thing they have been moving toward for a very long time. The group that had come through earlier, the 5 in the expensive sneakers, were still in the hall, near the entrance, the tail end of their afternoon. One of them looked over and noticed Evelyn Cross standing at Caleb's table. He knew who she was. Most people in the regional startup scene did. His smile from earlier was gone. By late afternoon, the story had made its way around the hall in the organic, slightly distorted way that stories do when they travel by word of mouth through a small room. The version that circulated first was factually incomplete. A woman had bought something from the guy with the junk table. The second version had more detail. Evelyn Cross Green Cycle Systems had signed something with the guy nobody had taken seriously. The third version, by the time it had crossed to most of the remaining people in the hall, was closer to accurate. $1 million licensing deal, a handshake, a term sheet, a table in the back of the room. The man in the gray jacket had heard the third version from someone who had been close enough to overhear part of the conversation. He stood near the entrance for a long moment, the branded stress ball from the scheduling app booth, turning slowly in his hand. He looked across the hall at Caleb's table. Then he put the stress ball in his jacket pocket and left without saying anything to anyone. The woman who had filmed the device was still nearby. She had already deleted the video. Not because anyone had asked her to, no one had, but because there is a particular quality of embarrassment that operates faster than external pressure, that moves from inside out rather than outside in. The video had been a joke. It was no longer a joke. She did not want to be the person holding it. The others in the group drifted out in 1s and 2s over the following 20 minutes. Derek, the staff coordinator, passed by Caleb's table on a collection run for signage materials. He stopped. He looked at the device. He looked at the term sheet in Caleb's hand. "Did something happen?" he said. "Yes," Caleb said. Derek nodded slowly, in the way people nod when they have made a small decision about how to carry a moment. "Congratulations," he said, and meant it. Evelyn had stepped away again to make another call to Marcus, who had sent the address that morning, and who would be hearing "You Were Right." I'll admit it, when he picked up. While she was gone, one of the nearby exhibitors came over. The man from the machine learning booth, still in his blazer, still slightly formal in his posture. He stood at the edge of Caleb's table. "I heard what happened," he said. That's really something." Caleb looked at him without hostility. "Thank you. I didn't stop by earlier," the man said. He was being honest, which cost him something. "I should have." "It's all right," Caleb said. And the thing about the way he said it was that it was clearly true that he was not performing forgiveness or managing the situation, but was genuinely, structurally fine. He was not the kind of person who needed the acknowledgement of others to understand what he had built. The acknowledgement was useful, practical, real. But it was not the foundation. He had never built his sense of himself on what other people saw when they looked at him. He had built it on what he knew when he looked at his own work. He folded the term sheet carefully along its original crease and placed it inside his jacket, in the same pocket where Lily's drawing had been sitting all day. He could feel both of them there, the drawing and the term sheet, paper edges almost touching. The hall was mostly quiet now. The track lighting buzzed faintly. Someone was stacking folding chairs near the back wall. The espresso machine, unplugged from its cord, sat beside a recycling bin like a prop that had served its purpose. Caleb began, methodically and without hurry, to pack up his table. He picked up Lily at 6:47 in the evening. His neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Margaret, opened the door with the particular look of someone who wants to ask a question but is not sure they're supposed to. Lily came running from the living room in socks, caught herself at the doorframe with both hands, and looked up at him. "How did it go?" she asked. She was 6, but she had learned to ask that question with the weight of someone older, as if she understood, in some part of herself that didn't yet have language for it, that the day had mattered. Caleb crouched down to her level. "It went well," he said. She studied his face for a moment, the way she had studied the device on his workbench, with a deliberate, unguarded attention that most adults had forgotten how to give. Then she put her arms around his neck and said, "I knew it would." He held on for a moment longer than he needed to. Margaret handed him Lily's backpack and a container of leftover soup she had made. She didn't ask any questions. She had raised 3 children and understood the look on a parent's face when the weight had shifted. On the drive home, Lily told him about the cartoons she had watched, the question she had asked Margaret about why clouds don't fall, the drawing she had made at the kitchen table of a city where all the buildings had puzzle boxes on their roofs. Caleb listened and responded, and navigated the streets in the dark, and felt, along the whole length of the drive, a quiet that was different from any quiet he had known in a long time. Not the quiet of absence, the quiet of arrival. At home, while Lily brushed her teeth and selected the stuffed animal that would sleep beside her that night, a serious process that involved a brief audition of 3 candidates, Caleb put the soup on the stove, placed the term sheet on the kitchen table, and looked at it for a moment. He did not feel the need to read it again. He knew what it said. He took the folder from the top of the refrigerator, the manila folder, with the medical paperwork clipped together inside, and held it for a moment. Then he put it back. Not because the problem was solved. Medical costs are a slow, long problem, not a single payment. He knew that. But what had been an open question whether the path forward existed had now been answered. And the distance between an open question and an answered one is, for the people who live inside them, almost immeasurably far. He sat at the kitchen table while the soup heated, and thought about the 11 minutes Evelyn had spent on the phone. He thought about the 46 pages in the composition notebook, which was now packed back in the padded bin in the car. He thought about the capacitor from a bad batch, the one failure he had catalogued honestly and corrected without anyone asking him to. He thought about a waiting room chair at 3 in the morning, and a daughter who hadn't yet learned what the world's opinion of something was supposed to mean. His phone rang at 7:22. "Evelyn," he answered. "I wanted to call before tomorrow," she said, "because the formal process starts in the morning, and once the lawyers are involved, conversations like this become less natural." A brief pause. "What you've built is extraordinary. I need you to know I mean that as a technical statement, not a compliment." Caleb turned the soup down on the stove. "I appreciate that. I want to talk, when the time is right, about a broader partnership. Not just licensing, development, roadmap. Your name on this as a co-creator going forward. That's worth discussing," Caleb said. There was a small sound from the hallway, Lily's feet on the floor, then the creak of her bedroom door. "Dad?" she called. "Is the soup ready?" "Almost," he called back. "Okay," Evelyn said, with a note in her voice that was not quite a smile, but was close to one. "Go take care of your daughter. We'll talk tomorrow." He said goodnight, put the phone on the counter, and stirred the soup. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the November night pressed quietly against the window. On the sill, in a row, sat the collection of broken things that Lily had gathered and kept: the cracked toy car, the busted calculator, the old remote control with its battery cover missing. None of them worked, but they were there. And in the morning, Caleb thought, he was going to ask her which one she wanted to fix first.